Welcome to another edition of Trail Runner Nation. My name is Don Freeman.
I am Scott War, and we've all heard, or we've even said it. I run so that I can eat anything I want. Or the reason I run all the miles I run is so that I can eat anything I want. Well, that may not be the best relationship that you can have with food. We all know that fuel we put in our bodies can help us fuel our workouts and, more importantly, help us recover from those workouts. But we all have life that gets in the way. We're all runners, not only just runners, professional runners, some of us maybe, but we have jobs, we have families, we have a lot of demands on our time, and sometimes we don't prioritize putting the right kinds of food in our mouth. We're excited to welcome Jason Levee to Trail Runner Nation. Jason is a registered dietitian, father of 3, and founder of Whole Family Health, where he practices helping busy families and individuals find practical ways to prioritize nutrition. Jason is here to help us understand some of the tricks and tips for quick meal prep hacks to building a healthier relationship with food, especially when life gets overwhelming. Jason, thanks for coming on. And I'm curious, you're a professional with 3 young kids. How do you balance life, work, family, and staying healthy?
Well, I'm excited to be here and to chat with you guys today. And thank you, Scott, for that question. So, look, it's not easy, right? It's hard. And anyone who kind of comes out and says it's such an easy time having little kids and working full time and trying to fit in your workouts, your training, all that stuff. And then, by the way, anything else that comes your way that's not on the weekly docket, it can throw you for a loop. And it's really, really hard to keep up with, eating in a way that you can feel good about, feeding your kids, feeding the rest of your family in a way that you can feel good about, especially if it's something like, hey, I'm training for something, but everyone else in the household isn't. And maybe our nutrition needs are a little bit different.
Right.
So I try to keep a framework in place for our meals kind of all year long. So that way, maybe we're eating different amounts of food, but we're all eating the same foods. And this is something that I work on day in, day out to keep it really consistent, really predictable, and take a lot of the decisions out of it. Because a lot of the times when it feels overwhelming, I've got to make so many decisions. I've got to plan so many different things for myself, for my kids, for my wife, whatever it is. And I'm sick of it. I don't want to make any more decisions. I just want to kind of go on autopilot and have it pick it up. So I like to break my meals up into kind of 3 components, and I'll have a good source of protein, a good source of starch for some carbs, and some vegetables, and just kind of break it up into those pieces, and then say, okay, I know I've got something from category 1, category 2, and category 3. Let's work on the proportions now. And so, depending on where I am or where someone else is in their training phase, or kind of what our schedule looks like and what's available, what we've got already kind of either ready to go or can cook quickly. We'll play around with proportions, and we'll play around with like seasonings and sauces and things like that. But if we have those 3 main groups on the plate, we know that we're getting protein, so we're helping our muscles recover. My kids are young, so I have a 5-year-old and twin 3-year-olds, so they're growing. Sometimes I joke that I have a 50-year-old and twin 13-year-olds based on how much they eat. But we want to make sure we have a good protein source on the plate to fuel growth for everyone and recovery as well, and keep us sharp. We want to make sure we have a good carb source on the plate because we all need energy, and carbs are our best friend when it comes to fueling ourselves and making sure we have enough energy. And then really, really driving home the point of let's eat a lot of vegetables. Let's get all of those micronutrients, all those phytonutrients, those nutrients only found in plants into our bodies so that we can recover, we can sleep, we can feel really good, stay healthy, not get sick. September, going back to school, everybody's picking up some type of bug. Well, we're trying to avoid that, right? So making sure we're getting all the vitamins, the minerals, the antioxidant compounds that are in there so that we can stay healthy and do all the things that we want to do and, not get infection du jour, to start off the school year. So I kind of think about it like that. I put it on autopilot, and, when there's not a lot of time, you kind of fall back on what I call like bailout meals, which are basically like, what are things I can put together in 20, 30 minutes that are easy, straightforward, and I know everybody likes. And when there's more time, maybe it's okay, let's be a little bit more creative, like a little bit different type of experience at mealtime. But like 95% of the time, I'm like, let's just scramble and get something on the plate and move on to the next thing. So that's kind of my approach, is just keep it simple. Keep it simple. Simple is usually best.
I like that approach, and I see where you're going. We need protein, we need carbs for the fuel, and vegetables for essential minerals and nutrients that are found there. And I can see that pre-planning those pieces, those big blocks, and sticking to that would be great. Now, I'm sure there's 100 questions that everybody's probably thinking, but this one's the one I have. What happens in the middle of those great pre-planned meals? Where I fall down is there happens to be a pantry right between my office and the kitchen that's a shorter walk that has lots of jars of goodies in there, and it's not exactly on the big three that you just listed. I have a hard time walking past that pantry. How can I be disciplined enough? And maybe we need a psychologist. How can we be disciplined enough not to fall off your regiment you're talking about?
You need a lock on that door, Freeman. Just lock the door.
There it is.
Throw away the key.
Let's go to the next question then. We've got that nailed down.
Well, I like to, when I'm working with people individually, we set up a goal hierarchy. So we have this like long-term goal, whatever it is you're working toward, whether you're training for something or you just want to feel healthier, weight loss, whatever it is, right? That's our overarching goal. And then we talk and we come up with what are kind of like the medium-term pillars or the core components that really go into that. So let's say, you're busy family or busy parent, and you're training, but not necessarily training for like a run or a race or anything like that, just training for overall health, and you want to lose a little bit of weight. So we know that you need to you need to eat fruits and vegetables. We know you need to be hydrated. We know you want to have like certain fiber goals. We kind of break all these things down into 3 or 4 key components. So it's about nutrition, sleep, hydration, stress management, whatever it is, whatever seems to make the most sense for you. And then within there, we make these like really small, detailed goals that we try to put in sequence. And so for the case of Don walking past the pantry, well, it may turn out that the things that are inside your pantry don't really align with any one of those goals. So you can pause, take a breath, and say, okay, I'm going to go into this pantry. Is there anything in there that's going to help me achieve these goals? Or is it going to slow me down or work against me achieving these goals? And then if the answer is everything's going to work against you, you can say, okay, am I okay with that? Right? Like, is this like a moment where I'm like, I just want to have the M&Ms or whatever, and I'm going to move on with my life and everything's going to be okay? Or is it a moment where you're like, that's actually not what I want to do. Let me keep going. Maybe there's like a banana and peanut butter I can have instead. That'll give me a little bit of sweetness. It'll also give me some protein and some fat, keep me full for longer, help me feel better. And I'm not going to have this like up and down my blood sugar all day long. I'm actually going to feel a lot better, both physically and mentally, about the choice I just made. And maybe that's the decision you make. And then, you start to stack those types of decisions one on top of another after that. And all of a sudden, you're 6-7 steps down the road and you've made a lot of progress. And maybe it was all spurred on by just skipping the pantry just that one time. I wish it went that way every single time. But it doesmes always go that way. But, sometimes it can. It really goes like that.
Good answers.
Hey, Jason, you mentioned, and this is going to take us on a little bit different tangent, but you mentioned fiber in, that whole thing. We often focus on proteins, carbohydrates, and vegetables. And I realize that fiber is in many of those things. Fiber is one of those things that I don't know whether I know a whole lot about it. I know it's good for me. I don't know whether I'm getting enough of it. And if I'm not, what should I be eating? Why is it important? And what should I be eating to get myself more fiber? And is it something that I need to supplement with a fiber drink, or can I get it with real whole food?
Great question. Fiber is my favorite nutrient. I think everyone should have a favorite nutrient, and mine is fiber. It is to me, it's the best indicator of overall diet quality, because fiber is only found in plants. There's no animal product that has any fiber in it. It is the indigestible carbohydrate component that is found in plants. And so if you're eating a lot of fiber, you're eating a lot of plants. If you're eating a lot of plants, you probably have a pretty healthy looking diet overall. To give you a point of reference, most Americans are eating somewhere between 10 and maybe 15 grams of fiber in a day. Some estimates are a little bit higher, some are a little bit lower. But the needs for adult men are about 35 to 40 grams in a day. It's actually 38 grams is the
Holy cow.
So we're a fiber deficient nation as a whole. I could go on a whole spiel about the food industry and why that is, but I'll spare you guys the time. Fiber is found in fruits and vegetables. It's found in whole grains, specifically whole grains, nuts, seeds, legumes like beans and things like that. And that's pretty much it, right? So it's only found in plant foods. It's not found in chicken. It's not found in beef. It's not found in eggs. It's not found in dairy products, naturally anyway. It's only found in plants. And so if we're eating a wide variety of plants, if we're eating lots and lots of fruits and vegetables and whole grains and nuts and seeds and beans, well, we're getting all those other nutrients you talked about before, but then you're also getting a bunch of fiber. Fiber is really important for helping to manage your LDL cholesterol, your bad cholesterol. It keeps it lower. It's the reason why Cheerios and Quaker Oats and things like that can say that the American Heart Association says that they are linked to a lower cholesterol. Oats have fiber in them, and those are both made from whole grain oats. When we think about fiber, we can also think about blood sugar management. So fiber slows down the digestion and absorption of nutrients. And so when it does that, well, what happens is instead of eating X amount of carbohydrates, let's say 50 grams of carbohydrates, instead of your blood sugar just going straight up like it would with a refined grain, fiber is going to slow that down. So it's still going to rise, and it should after you eat. You're supposed to have an increase in your blood sugar after you eat, but it's not going to get quite as high, and it's not going to fall quite as fast, and it's not going to fall quite as low. So it's this nice, like even, like shallow slope rather than these like steep peaks and valleys that we can see when we have these refined grains or these refined sugars that we're having in our foods. Fiber also plays a major role in our digestive health. It feeds the good bacteria in your gut. So you probably heard a lot of talk about probiotics and the good bacteria, the bad bacteria. It's this emerging field of science. I think it'll probably be called an emerging field of science for the next couple decades because we learn new stuff about it all the time, and it's really, really fascinating. But the fiber can feed the good bacteria and help them to proliferate preferentially over the bad bacteria. So we're forcing out the bad bacteria because the good bacteria are kind of planting their flag and saying, we're here to stay, we're not going anywhere. Here's our food source. Whereas when we eat more of the refined carbs, the refined sugars, we're feeding preferentially the bad bacteria, which will then cause more things like bloating and gassiness, but then also some knock-on effects to our cognitive health and our mental health as well. So fiber is super, super, super important. And it has a place in your diet. And, ideally we'd all eat a lot more. It is a key component of the DASH diet, which is targeted at reducing hypertension or high blood pressure. The list goes on. It's really self-limiting in terms of the amount you'll eat. So the risk of like kind of overdoing it on fiber is really, really low. Because if you think about it, beans are a food that are very, very, very high in fiber. And you'll kind of stop eating beans at a certain point. You'll be like, all right, I've had enough. Like, time to step away from the black beans. It's going to go poorly if I don't. And so you'll stop yourself in advance. So you can safely eat a good amount of fiber. I have patients who've gone from eating 6 or 7 grams of fiber in a day. Now they're well over 40 or 50, and having blood markers coming down and feeling their best. And they're moving into their 40s, their 50s, in some cases their 60s, and moving better, living better, feeling their best, sleeping better, stress is better managed. And it's not all because of fiber, but it's a big piece of it. It's a really, really big piece of the puzzle. You also asked about fiber supplementation. Maybe, right? Like,
yeah.
It depends on your diet. Everything is kind of individualized. Supplements are called supplements because they are supplemental to your diet. So I'm a dietitian, so I'm always going to be biased for food first. And to the degree that you're able to get, all your nutrients from food, I say go for it. But if you can't, then maybe there's room for some psyllium husk or some other type of fiber supplement in the diet for you.
Good. That's it's a nice reminder that even all nutrients are very important. So thanks for that reminder. Yeah. Earlier you said sleep and stress. If you're down on sleep, up on stress, and maybe that fits somebody that's listening to this podcast or somebody that's actually on it. Decreased sleep, increased stress can lead to, I think, poor food choice because you're trying to correct those two problems that you have there. Let's talk a little bit about how our own behavior can lead to these stops in the pantry for me. Do you notice this is all about me, Jason? And I'm sorry about that. Go ahead.
This is a good forum for us to have our first session together, Don. So
good. It's an intervention, Don. Intervention.
Yeah, we're all here for you today. So So
Did you even hit record, Brian? Are you recording this, or is this just for me to get my intervention in?
he's recording it, but it's actually not going to get published. It's just going to be playing on loop in your office. So perfect. So
Nice.
sleep and stress are crucial. They are crucial components to it. When we sleep, there are so many things happening in our body and in our brain. And when we get adequate sleep, we are regulating our decision-making abilities for the next day. We're regulating the amount of hormones that are produced. So we've got hormones like leptin and ghrelin that are produced in balance with each other. Overnight, ghrelin is our hunger hormone. Leptin is more of our satisfaction or satiety hormone. I always think of ghrelin kind of sounds like growling, like your stomach growling. That's how I remember it. And so, we produce these hormones overnight, and we need to make sure they stay in balance. When we don't get adequate sleep, for whatever reason, whether you're working late, up early, whatever the case may be, well, if that happens on a regular basis, these hormones are going to fall out of balance with each other, and we are likely in that case to overeat in order to compensate for the hormonal imbalance there. That overeating can turn into extra calories coming in, and those extra calories can turn into weight gain. They don't always, but they can. Stress can lift our cortisol response, and that can play all sorts of games with our appetite and with our food choices. Think about a time when you've been stressed out and the decisions you made when you were stressed out. You're probably not like the most proud of those decisions that you made, whether they were food related or otherwise. But when we have, calm body, calm mind, we're able to make a lot more rational decisions and really feel good about the choices we're making. We're not going to be as impulsive. We're going to be a lot more thoughtful, a lot more mindful. We're going to be a lot more in touch with what our body needs. Our bodies are so smart. Our brains try to outsmart them. So we like our bodies know what we need, but when we don't listen to them, that's when we get ourselves into trouble. So, if we can keep our stress and we can keep our sleep in check, we can really make better choices around food, and honestly, probably better choices around everything else in our lives as well, to really keep ourselves, living our best lives and our healthiest lives.
Jason, just like anything, if you're out there training for a race, you got to have a training plan, and that plan needs to be very specific. It needs to be laid out with, you're going to do workouts on Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. There needs to be a plan, and you need to be disciplined to execute that plan. Nutrition, I would assume, is the same thing. But here's the deal on, my intervention for today is a lot of times dinner time comes around and I don't have a plan. And so I look at my wife and I go, what are we going to have for dinner today? And she's tired from a long day's work. I'm tired from a long day's work. And we say, let's order a pizza. So the plan goes out the door. I want to know, how can you help me be more disciplined? Are there some tips, some hacks? I know that there's people that start the week and they make all 7 days worth of dinners and lunches and put them in the refrigerator in nice little color coded Tupperware with bows and I love you notes on them. I have not done that. What are, in your experience, what are some practical tips that can help me be more disciplined in my plan for nutrition?
It really comes down to prioritizing it. So how do you make it your priority? How do you make anything your priority, right? So take a step back and
right.
How important is this to me? If it's not important, then it's not going to be prioritized. But if it is important, you'll make time for it, right? So you can take a step back. Maybe it's on Sunday, maybe it's on Wednesday. Everyone's schedule is a little bit different or a lot different. And you take that time and you look ahead at the week and say, okay, this week's going to be crazy. I know that, we've got stuff every night for work or for kids or whatever it is. So how are we possibly going to feed ourselves? Well, and those weeks happen, but then there's other weeks that are less crazy. They're, just normal level of crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So you make it a priority to sit down at the beginning of the week and figure out, like, where do you need support? Where do you need help? And what can you plan ahead for? What can you make ahead if you want to make something ahead? Or what can you do the prep work for, so that way you don't have to, all of a sudden be like, all right, what's for dinner? I don't want to cut up an onion. I don't want to cut up any garlic. I don't want to peel anything. What can you do in advance when you have more time? So having a plan does really, really help. It can be as detailed or as not detailed as you want it to be, whatever is going to work for you. but it's all about figuring out what works for you. It's not what works for me, because what works for me is going to be different than what works for anybody else. Because everybody's situation is different, right? Everyone's got different preferences, different capability or appetite for learning new skills in the kitchen. And so, what are you comfortable with doing, and how often do you want to be in the kitchen? How much time do you want to spend in the kitchen? Do you want to spend more time in the grocery store, or do you want to order your groceries online? Do you want to do a meal service? Maybe you can do that. Maybe not. It depends what's available in your area. There are some that are national. There are some that are more regional, and there's a lot of variability within them. Even within one individual meal delivery service, there's a lot of variability in terms of the actual meals that are sent and what you receive. And so, you want to think through, like, what do I need to do in order to get support here? So I love to think about convenience in advance, so that the convenience doesn't sacrifice the plan. Convenience doesn't sacrifice the goal. What I mean by that is, what do I not have to do anymore, right? So I don't want to spend all my time, breaking down broccoli and chopping it up. But I love broccoli. My kids love broccoli. My wife loves broccoli. We eat a lot of broccoli. So what I'll do is I'll go to the freezer section. I'll get the biggest bag of frozen broccoli I can find. And I will go through one or two of those every single week. And frozen vegetables are great. I will get frozen vegetables that are, they don't have any sauce, they don't have any seasoning on them. And then I can flavor them however I want to after I cook them, or as I cook them. I'm lucky. My kids love just plain old steamed broccoli, and my wife and I are like, great, one less thing for us to have to worry about. But you can do anything you want with them with frozen vegetables, and they're just as nutritious, and in some cases actually more nutritious. I should be able to say that word a little bit more clearly than fresh, because they are picked at the peak of their ripeness. They're picked at the peak of freshness, and then they are flash frozen, nearby to the farm, rather than traveling, across the country. So I live in New York. We have some produce that's grown in upstate New York and in New Jersey, but not that much, right? So especially in the wintertime, stuff's coming from all over the country, or all over the world, really. So the frozen vegetables are actually picked really, really, like right at the peak of freshness, and then they're frozen right away. They're flash frozen at the processing plant, and then they come to me and they're frozen still, so they're locked in as they were. Fresh vegetables and fresh fruit will be picked, days, maybe even weeks in advance. They'll ripen in transit, and then maybe they're still good by the time they get here, maybe they're not, right? Especially in the winter. So I love leaning on the frozen section. I'll do that for vegetables. I'll do it for whole grains like brown rice or quinoa. You can find in the freezer section, and you can warm it up in the microwave or on the stove if you want to. And I can have dinner on the table using those types of things, and then having some proteins kind of on hand is always helpful as well. That can have dinner on the table in 20 minutes or less usually, by relying on those types of convenience foods. Because convenience can often mean, let's have this hyper processed, like maybe frozen meal, or maybe fast food, or takeout, whatever it is. But I'd much rather be in control of the amount of salt, the amount of sugar, the amount of seasoning in general, or whatever else is going on the food, rather than letting someone else take that control. I know that I can make food taste really, really good, even if I'm taking out the steps of me being the person who cuts the broccoli up, or boils the water or the broth to cook the rice in it. I don't need to do all that. I'm fine doing other things, as long as I can still get that food on the table in a reasonable amount of time. So I like to take those types of shortcuts and make sure I have those types of things ready to go. For proteins, whatever you can cook ahead if you want to is a great option, or prep ahead of time. Like, you can throw chicken in a marinade and let it sit for a couple days, rather than feeling like you have to do everything all in one shot. You can do things like hard boil eggs ahead of time, and they'll stay in the fridge. They'll be ready to go. You can also scramble eggs in about 3 minutes. So that can be like a quick thing as well. But there's lots and lots of ways to have quick on the go or ready to go protein sources to have on hand as well. So that way, you've got those three components and they're all there. It's just a matter of, warming them, or maybe not even warming them, and then getting them on the plate and eating them. So, if you plan ahead, you kind of run out of excuses sometimes.
Yeah.
I've got a question for you about your journey. You are a registered dietitian that works with families and helping them provide a table that's healthy and happy, mm-hmm. and with athletes that have goals in mind, either starting from needing to shed a couple pounds to competing in their A race. So you work with both groups, but it started out, I assume, as a registered dietitian. What does it take to be a registered dietitian? Is there a degree or a school for that? Give us a little bit of background of of what it means to be a registered dietitian, and then how you put it into practice.
Yeah. So a registered dietitian is, there's a lot of school. Let's put it that way at this point. You have to go through a whole program where we take, God, I can't remember exactly how many credits it is, but we take most of a bachelor's degree in nutrition. And now there's a requirement for a master's degree as well. We do a year-long internship. Most of it's in a hospital setting, where we're working alongside doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners. It runs the gamut under the supervision of folks who are already registered dietitians, and we're training, in multiple different disciplines. Every hospital setting is a little bit different. Some people do them in more like long-term care facilities, or have more of a focus on eating disorders. You can go a number of different ways. It's a really competitive match process where less than half of the applicants match in each cycle. So it's really, really hard, really, really difficult to get in. And then at the end of that, you still have to pass a national licensing exam. So it's a multi-year journey. And for me, when I graduated college, I was actually an economics major, and I worked in finance for about 10 years. So I did not take the most traditional route to become a dietitian. I had a battle with weight loss most of my youth and into college, basically. And when I finally got a handle on nutrition, it all kind of clicked for me, and I lost a bunch of weight. My confidence shot up. I started feeling better, performing better. Sports were a lot easier for me as well at that point. And things just got a lot better for me. But I never saw it as a career path. I graduated college in 2008, so worked in finance was quite the time to start doing that. But I would come home from work every day, and my wife would look at me and she'd be like, "What's going on?" And I'd just be like, "I just don't care about what I'm doing. Like I'm perfectly fine doing it." She's like, "Well, we're gonna have kids soon, or we want to have kids soon, and you got to do something you actually care about. Like you can't just be miserable all the time." And I was like, "You know what? You're right." She's usually right. And so I talked to a lot of people about different career paths, and I kept coming back to nutrition as the thing I really, really cared the most about, got really fired up every time I talked about it. And I took a leap and I went back to school and basically had to completely redo my bachelor's, get my master's, and then go through that whole training program. And then, I initially wanted to be a weight loss dietitian. When my wife got pregnant and we had our oldest son, that changed. And I realized, what? There's not a lot of information out there for families that's reliable. And I want to change that because there's so much bad information out there. There's not enough good information. As I got more and more into my practice, I started working kind of by chance with more and more athletes. And it really struck a chord with me because athletes are people who are really, really motivated, really, really disciplined, and have clear goals and will work really hard toward those goals. And I love that. It inspires me every single day, whether I'm coaching someone who's, going on their first, just starting out, going on their first like longer run, or someone who's competing in a marathon. I work with folks who are doing Ironman competitions and things like that. I work with CrossFit athletes, and just it kind of runs the gamut. People at every step of the way, and it's really inspiring just to hear their stories and to see the transformation in their performance. Either on the course or on the field, versus from when they weren't paying attention to what they're eating to what they're doing now. Whether they're weekend warrior type athlete or a little bit more advanced than that. Just seeing the difference in the way that people can perform when nutrition is not even like 100% dialed in, but just a little bit more locked in, a little bit more attention paid to it. Just a little tinkering around the edges sometimes can make a huge difference. And it's amazing to see. And I see it, and I can see it sometimes on the stat sheet. I can see it in terms of playing time. I can see it in terms of race times. And then I see it when people keep coming back also. So it's the most inspiring group of people I've worked with. It's the parents who are really, really busy and just want to feed their kids. And it's, athletes who are really striving towards something. And, I love it. It fires me up every single day. I no longer have those conversations with my wife anymore about me being miserable after work. So, which is, it's such a change for me also to be, just inspired by it and to be lit up every single day by, the stories I'm hearing and helping people overcome these challenges in their lives and really, really see the light and start to perform at a higher and higher level.
And if you're not like motivated to talk to Jason more about this, you should be. And we'll mention this in the show notes and at the end of the podcast. But wholefamilyhealth.co is where you can find out more information and where you can get in touch with him. Jason, this is a two-part question. Sorry, Don, two-part question.
That's all right.
But it's going to be really easy to remember the two parts. The first part is, you mentioned as a young man, even into college, you struggled with weight, maybe didn't have a great relationship with food. What change did you make that turned that around in your personal life? That's the first part. And the second part
is, we have to do two together, Scott?
Yeah.
I want to hear that answer.
I
don't know if I can keep track.
They're
okay. All right.
They're related.
I'm with you.
So what did you change? What did you change? And then secondly, is there a story of someone that you've worked with? We can redact the names to protect the innocent, of someone that you've seen just make a tremendous change and the results from that. So yourself and someone else.
Yeah. So my at the end of my freshman year of college, I came home and I stepped on the scale and I weighed like 230 pounds. I'm 5'6", so not a great height weight combination there. And it was kind of this awakening for me where I was like, oh my goodness, like what happened? And I sat down with my parents and I was like, I need to do something different. Like, I don't want this. Like, I don't want to look like this. I don't want to feel like this. I don't feel like myself. And I did some research at that point into, some basic principles of dieting. But, at that point, based on what I was eating my freshman year of college, it wasn't so earth shattering what I needed to do. I kind of needed to just get back to basics of, eating more fruits and vegetables, less late night eating, and not even necessarily being like, okay, I'm going to stop eating at 8:00 or something arbitrary like that, but not staying up super late, prioritizing my health, prioritizing my sleep, and really making sure I had more of a routine instead of just kind of taking a fly by the seat of your pants type of approach. As I started doing that, I was also lucky I had like 18-year-old male metabolism. So that really worked to my benefit.
Yeah.
So the weight started coming off over the summer and I got really, really inspired by that. And I like helped my confidence a lot. I lost like 30 pounds over the summer and then I kept going with it. Right. So I brought all those skills that I had been working on over the summer back to college with me to start my sophomore year. And I kept it going. I started cooking more meals for myself. I was living off campus at that point, so I was able to have a kitchen and have all my own stuff rather than being in the dorms and being reliant on dining halls and things like that. So it was a lot easier in that way. It was also harder because socially it wasn't always like the easiest thing when you're in school to not want to do what all your friends are doing. But I made some sacrifices and I recognized that there was benefit to it in terms of the way I felt day in, day out and my performance in school and my performance, in my workouts and things like that. So it flipped the switch for me, kind of from one or two conversations with my parents. And I kind of knew I needed to do it on my own. I was like, I'm going to live on my own for, 9 or 10 months of the year. I'll be home over the summer, but, I have an older brother, so he was out of the house already. So, they were kind of pushing me to also be more independent at that point. And so I really took it. And it was, one of the first times that I really felt like, me taking charge of my own life was having this major impact. And I kind of carried it with me ever since then. I mean, there's been ups and downs over the years, but it's been much more dialed in and much more locked in than it was at that point. And it's helped me, so much to have this foundation to fall back on when things get difficult or things get tricky, to not feel like, okay, like things are getting out of control and I'm going to gain all the weight back. It's been a lot better in that way. So that's, that was kind of my story. I mean, and then as I started feeling better, I started working out more as well. And then you start putting both together and
right.
You start feeling better, looking better. It's easier to go for a run or go for a bike ride or something like that. Whatever I wanted to do, I didn't feel like I was out of breath all the time. I was able to, flag football, soccer, whatever it was always a lot more fun whenever you're not just getting winded going up and down the field a couple times. As I started working with people, one of the people that really comes to mind, there's a guy I'm working with right now still, and he works probably 65 hours a week. He has a young daughter who's 3 years old. His wife also works, and they're trying to be really present for their kid. He's also trying to train for, I forget which race it is, but it's a long bike race. It's one of his first races he's ever done, and he's really, since they had their kid and since he started working, he's become much more sedentary. So he's sitting around a lot more, and he's gained probably 40 or so pounds over the last several years, and he reached a breaking point, and we started talking. And part of it was, we needed to repair his relationship with food. Food was becoming a coping mechanism for him, and not so much a source of fuel or something that he could look to for energy at times. It was much more becoming like, okay, I'm having a really hard time at work. Let me just eat something, take a break, and then I'll get right back to it. And over time, you do that time and time again. It just becomes the only coping mechanism. It's gratifying. It lights up centers in your brain. It becomes almost addictive. It's not quite addictive, but it becomes kind of this like repetitive process that you can fall back on. And he was falling into this place where, he was reaching, like I said, gaining 40 pounds in just a few years and not feeling like himself at all. So we started talking, and I can get into the mechanics of it with like very quickly with patients, and we can talk through like, okay, let's be really practical. Let's just kind of here are the steps we want to take, and it's always I always talk through like here, like let's set the goals together, and I'll have some suggestions, but I want you to come up with the steps that you want to take, because if you come up with them, you're much more likely to do them than me like kind of pushing something on you. I try not to do that as much as I can. As we're talking, we're getting into this, and I pause and I go, hey, like, do you actually want to do this? Like, what's going on? Because I could tell he was kind of he's pushing back a little bit. And then we really got into his relationship with food, and we got into talking through what was it like growing up in his household. What were meal times like? Were his parents present? And when they were, what was it? What was the conversation about food like? Was there any conversation about food? And it turned out there was so much pressure on him as a kid to eat in a certain way in line with what his parents believed was a healthy diet, that it created such a negative relationship with food, where certain things were rewards and that stuck with him, and other foods were kind of like punishments. Classic, like vegetables were punishment basically because he was forced to eat them, and it just created so much negativity that eventually, as he got into his late 20s into his early 30s, it started to just compound and compound and compound, and he was like completely opposed to even touching a single vegetable as a result. And so we had to do a lot of work together to figure out like, okay, well, that happened. You can't change what happened. You can change what you're doing next. You can control your reaction to these things. You can control what you're doing going forward. You've got an obstacle in front of you, and that's okay, right? We've all got obstacles. Let's figure out how to navigate that obstacle. How do you start to, get back to the foundation of what do you want your diet to look like? What do you want to be able to do? This is before he signed up for his race. And so he set this goal. He's like, I want to do this in like the next year or two. And I said, great, let's figure out a way to do it. Let's figure out a way to get you back on the bike, get you back, make a plan for you, for your nutrition, for your training. But let's really make sure that what we're also doing is setting you up so that, after your race, you have a good foundation to fall back on, so that you're not just kind of like back where you started, like hating broccoli, hating cauliflower, all these things. He has come so far in the last 6 months. It is unbelievable. It is truly unbelievable. He is cycling, like, I think he did like 100 miles last week. He's finding time that he didn't know he had. His relationship with his wife has improved because they're communicating more openly. That was a big part of it, was like not having the support system in place because they weren't talking to each other enough about how to care for their daughter, but also how to care for each other and how to take care of each other and how to make time for each other. And so it opened up this new line of communication where now they're able to just work so much more hand in hand together to find time for him to train, find time to prepare meals together. Everybody's kind of eating in a similar enough way that it can work. So they're not all eating exactly the same things, but similar enough that the Venn diagram isn't like 3 separate circles. It's a little more overlap than there was previously. And so now he's performing at a really, really high level for him, right? It's all relative to where he is. He's not going on the Tour de France or anything like that, but he's able to get on the bike, feel really, really confident, feel good as he is, racking up this mileage and going into into a higher training phase as he's getting ready for his race. So he's feeling really, really good. And for me, that's what it's all about. It's how do you feel, right? How do you feel as you're going through training? If training is painful, if it's not fun, you're probably training for the wrong thing. You're training in the wrong way. You're going about something in a way that you don't necessarily need to do, right? Like we can change some things around so that way, it can be enjoyable. Like the journey should be fun. You should enjoy the journey to get there. Otherwise, you're not going to want to do it again. And cycling for him is great stress relief. It's amazing for his mental health. It gives him so much clarity. I've talked to him. We did a phone call like right as he was coming back from a longer ride, and we were talking like as he was kind of waiting to get picked up because he didn't want to ride all the way back to the city. And we're just on the phone, and he's like, "I feel amazing right now." He's like, I haven't felt this way in such a long time. Everything is so clear, and I was like, "This is the best." Like I hadn't heard this like sound in his voice ever before. And so
Nice.
giving that support to people to help them find that path, so that they can train in a way where they are, feeling really, really good during training, before training, after training, making sure that they're getting the sleep that they want to get at night or that they need to get at night, managing their stress, performing well at work. It's kind of all encompassing, right? It's this really, really holistic approach. And it's, he's emblematic of, the performance that I see from people, people putting up, best times in marathons, half marathons, splits, getting better and better as they're training, figuring out how to properly carb load before a race instead of just kind of being all willy-nilly about it. There's all these steps that we can take, and it really does pay off, and it's amazing to see. It's that when that switch flips or that light goes on, that's the moment, that's the thing. And I'm like, yes, here we are. And now I'm like, now we can really lean into it. We ride that motivational wave, and motivation tapers at times, but we lift that floor of where you are. And as you get remotivated again, or we find something to motivate you again in another way, we push again, we keep pushing. And so we just try to ride that wave the whole way.
You said the relationship with food, and I thought, well, we could probably do an entire podcast series on relationship with food, because whether you're stressed, maybe you're not eating enough, maybe you had learned habits. And I started thinking, what's my relationship with food? And I remember being that child at the table being told, eat everything on your plate, finish everything and try some of that. And, it was really, there's starving people in this world, and do your part by eating more for them. I don't know what the process was, but I do know that I have this obligation to make sure I fill my plate and empty my plate, when maybe that's not the right thing to do. Maybe just, controlling my portions is a good solution. So I have been working on that. So I guess this is part of my intervention, but yeah, I'm doing that, Jason. This relationship with food is real.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? If you ever see like an infant who is either breastfeeding or bottle feeding, whatever, however they're eating, they innately know to like unlatch from their mom or from the bottle when they're done eating, right? They'll just stop. And we innately have this hunger and the satiety cue, or the satisfaction cue, that we follow when we're born. We all have learned in different ways to override them. And there's a million different reasons for that. Whether it's from our parents, from society, from, more is more, more is better, like eat, whatever it is. We've all learned to override those. Sometimes it's a practical matter because of schedule, like you can't eat when you're hungry, or, you have to eat at a certain time because that's the only time that's available to you. And sometimes that's okay, right? But when we ignore our hunger because we're like, oh, I read somewhere that I should stop eating at this time, or I should skip breakfast because it's an effective way to calorie restrict. But if you're hungry, that's your body's way of telling you should eat, right? That's your body's way of saying like, hey, we need fuel. We really do. We're not kidding. But it's up to you and your brain to actually interpret that signal and act on it. And so we override those cues, and that's what starts to screw up our relationship with food. As we do that more and more and more, our body still sends those signals. We just don't even hear them anymore. We kind of mute them. We're like, go away. We don't want to hear it. So we've got to get back in touch with that. It's one of the first things I work on with people when they are saying like, I don't even recognize when I'm hungry anymore. Like, okay, like hunger is a regular physiological sensation. You are still experiencing hunger. You're just not realizing it. And so let's figure out how to do that. Let's, maybe it's keeping a journal around around food, but not for the purpose of like calorie counting, but more for registering like when you ate, where were you on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of hungry? Were you at a 1, which is like not at all hungry, or were you at a 10 where you were like, I need to eat the next thing I see. I do not care what it is. Like I will eat anything. I will eat this piece of paper that's in front of me right now. Right? Like we've all been there once or twice. That's so
Yeah.
it's figuring out, are you on that scale, and are you even able to register that scale? And if you're not, then let's have like a real conversation about it, and let's probably have multiple conversations about it to start to figure out what can we do to bring that back. Maybe you're not eating breakfast because you've decided that that's something that you don't want to do anymore for whatever reason, and there's a lot of reasons why people choose not to do that anymore. Sometimes we just start by saying, hey, let's eat something in the morning. Let's see how you feel. Try it out. Give me a week of it, right? A week in the grand scheme of things, it's a drop in the bucket. If you really hate it, maybe we'll go away from it. 9 times out of 10, people are like, I didn't realize I was hungry in the morning. I just didn't realize. They're like, I've been intermittent fasting for 8 years, and I didn't realize I was hungry in the morning. I thought I just stopped being hungry in the morning. Or they say, I'm not a breakfast person, or whatever it is. But eating in the morning is a good thing. It helps to set up your metabolism, set up your energy for the rest of the day to, help you fuel yourself adequately. It's really, really hard to hit all of your nutrient goals if you're not eating in the morning. And so we do things like that to test it out, to say, hey, did your hunger cues come back? What did you notice? What does hunger feel like for you? Where do you feel it? And those are things we never think about, right? You never think about like, what does hunger actually feel like? And oftentimes I get a look of, what do you mean? And I'll be like, okay, well, tell me.
Yeah.
When you feel hungry, do you feel cranky? Do you feel lightheaded? Do you feel tired? Do you feel it in your stomach? Do you feel it in your head? Where do you notice it? Are you unmotivated? Do you feel like you're going to fall asleep? Are you not able to focus at work? Like, what are these things? And people are like, oh yeah, like I do notice that. That usually happens around like 11 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, oh, like, have you thought about eating at 11 o'clock in the morning or earlier? And then we try it, and I'm like, I don't feel that way at 11 o'clock in the morning anymore. And so I was hungry. I was calling it like the mid-morning slump. I'm like, you shouldn't get a mid-morning slump. You were sleeping 8 hours a night. You are okay. So there's all sorts of things like that we can start to play with to start to repair your relationship with food. That's a small piece. Yeah,
Jason, I just had a breakthrough, and you dug deep enough where now I can see what's happening. One, maybe I put my office in the wrong location. That could be it because it's so close to the pantry. But I think what happens to me in my relationship with food, I get tired of what I'm doing at work. I'm pounding on the keyboard, trying to do whatever, and all of a sudden this idea comes in my head like, those cashews sound pretty good right now. And it allows me to stand up and walk away from whatever I'm doing. Now, I'm not saying I should move cashews closer to me. I don't think that's the answer, but I do need to recognize that it's not really hunger that I have. It's the desire not to be doing this right now. Maybe I need to switch my task. Maybe I need to do something and not use a trip to the pantry to grab those cashews as my way to get away. So I'm going to start observing that food relationship based on your comments. So thank you for that.
Sometimes it's just taking a break. Right? Like sometimes food serves as the reason to take a break. People used to take smoke breaks back in the 80s, and
right.
So I don't know, but
yeah,
that served as a break. It was a way to get away from the desk. I'm not suggesting that you smoke cigarettes by any stretch, but the idea remains the same, right? It's like, take a break, like every 45 minutes or every hour or whatever it is. Take a break. Go outside, get some sunlight, get some fresh air, or just go for a walk, like up and down the stairs, even just something quick, 5 minutes maybe, to get outside.
Change my break.
Yeah, change the location where you are. Like, go get a glass of water.
Yeah.
Like, when in doubt, drink some water. It's always a good decision to hydrate. But taking that break and giving your eyes a break, looking away from a screen will reduce your visual strain as well. And all of these different things can kind of go together to help you to, recalibrate and reset. And then you can come back with a relatively fresh set of eyes and say, okay, like, where was I in my work? Great. Let's pick it back up where I was. It gives you a chance to reset. It gives your brain a chance to clear. And it gives you the opportunity to refocus a little bit. Cashews, they're delicious. Don't get me wrong. They have a place in your diet for sure. But if their purpose is serving as like taking a break, that's not the right place, right? They can fit somewhere else. They can be part of breakfast. They can be part of a snack. They can be part of lunch or dinner or wherever you want them to be, but not for the purpose of taking a break, right? They can be, let's say you're like, okay, I'm planning the snack. I'm going to have a mid-morning snack, and it's going to be like yogurt and nuts and fruit or something like that. great, go for it. But yeah, go ahead.
Jason,
Sorry.
I selected cache foods carefully, very carefully. I didn't tell you what else was in that pantry. I thought of the most healthy thing I could. So
M&Ms.
Oh, that's in there. That's in there. Go ahead, Scott. You had some good questions ready for us.
You know, in our last few minutes, Jason, I wanna take a left turn on the trail and maybe get a little more specific away from the whole philosophy of food and get a little more specific for training and racing. Boy, there has been so many different philosophies lately on what we should eat before a run, how we should eat after a workout. You know, we used to go to these big pasta feeds before a race and carb load up the night before. And then we made a complete pendulum swing over to getting into this ketosis where we want to teach our bodies to burn fat. So we should go out and work out in a fasted state so that we don't have any carbs and our body is forced to burn fat as a fuel source. I'm curious from your standpoint, what is the best way to fuel for a workout? And then what should we be doing, if anything, after a workout to fuel for recovery?
So there's lots and
It's
lots
a
of different
two-parter, Jason. It's a two-parter. It's a two-part question.
Did you notice that?
Before and after.
I snuck that in.
Yeah.
I snuck that in.
So I guess, Scott, it depends, right? Like, what kind of workout are we talking about? If we're talking about something that is, more, endurance based, we're going to fuel one way. And if we're talking about something that's a little bit more like strength based, it might be a little bit different.
Let's say,
Yeah.
let's be more specific. Yeah. Endurance based, an hour run.
Okay. If we're going for an hour run, probably, about 2 hours beforehand, we want to eat something with a little bit of carbohydrate in it, not a lot of fat in it, maybe a little bit of protein. So what can that look like? It can be something like some bananas, or maybe some oatmeal, something along those lines. That's going to give you a good dose of carbohydrates, so you have carbs to run on while you are, while you're out there going for that hour-long run. You don't need much more than that. It's more important to hydrate than anything else. And hydration, by that I actually just mean water. I don't mean electrolyte supplements or anything like that. I just mean water. It's really important to be hydrated. We are 70, 80% water, depending on your body composition. So water is super, super, super important. We need it in order to have adequate blood volume to deliver nutrients and remove waste products from our muscles, right? So we need to be able to do that, and we need adequate blood volume. We need water to do that. So make sure you get hydrated, right? And a couple hours beforehand, eat something that's got a good amount of carbohydrates in it. If it's a later in the day run, maybe 4 hours beforehand, you eat something a little bit more substantial that has some protein and fat in it as well, but also a good amount of carbohydrates in it. It really depends. Is this like a top end speed run for you, for like if you're really pushing the pace, or is this more of like a back off run? It kind of depends where you are. You can scale your carbs based on the effort level that you're intending to put in, but at the same time, you don't want to overdo it so you're still digesting while you run. So it's a delicate balance. Typically I recommend try not to eat less than 2 hours before, and if it's got to be closer, have it be really, really simple carbohydrates that are faster digesting. And then afterward, hydrate again. So hydration for an hour-long run, depending on the temperature outside, you may or may not need to bring water with you. You may be able to get by just hydrating beforehand and afterward, but everyone's experience is going to be different, right? So you got to kind of feel that out for yourself a little bit. Longer than an hour, probably should bring water with you, right? So it's kind of hour and a half is kind of the cutoff point I usually look at, depending on where you are. I'm in New York, so it's warm-ish today, but over the summer it was like 95 degrees every day. It felt like, and so going for a run, anything longer than a minute and a half, you'd want water. So it was it really depends where you are. Afterward, we do want to focus on protein. It really does help your muscles recover, but we also want to focus on eating fruit. Fruit is going to pack a lot of antioxidants, and blueberries in particular are super, super dense in terms of their antioxidant capacity. And that can help to reduce like post-exercise inflammation, right? And so when we do that, we're able to help the muscles recover a little bit faster. They're not the only food that does it. They just happen to be a great example of it, and they taste great. But you can, different types of berries, different types of fruit will pack a lot of antioxidants in. And then, trying to have a good amount of protein, maybe 30 grams of protein or so in the post workout phase. There used to be this thought of like, there's
Wow.
this magic window of 30 minutes after you work out. I'm much more interested in your daily protein intake than your 30 minutes after you work out protein intake. Is there benefit? Yes. Is it an extraordinarily higher benefit, like a really, really big margin? No. It helps if you're a super competitive athlete and you want to be really, really locked in and dialed in. Great, go for it. Like, by all means, like, take every advantage you can get and eat within that 30-minute window. But if you're just, regular person who is just going out for an hour-long run, it does not have to be within 30 minutes of running, or lifting or whatever it is. I'm much more interested in you getting enough protein throughout the course of the day. Your body's going to use that protein throughout the course of the day, throughout overnight, to help repair and rebuild. So much of our recovery happens overnight while we sleep. And so making sure you're getting that protein in throughout the course of the day is supremely important. It's great if you can get it in after you run, but if it's got to be a little bit longer, then maybe maybe that's okay, right? Like, we can try to aim to get it in, throughout the rest of the day instead. It's totally fine.
I'm really glad you said that, because I was thinking, man, 30 grams of protein is a lot of protein to try to push down the gullet after a workout. So I'm glad that, get as much as you can and make sure that you just get the right amount throughout the day. Hey, Jason, thank you so much. This has been a really good intervention for Don and I, and maybe an intervention for those that are listening. I think it's reprioritized nutrition for me. Absolutely. So thank you for that. You can find more about Jason at wholefamilyhealth.co. Of course, that link will be in the show notes. He's open for coaching and nutrition guidance, wherever you live. You don't have to go to New York. You can, if you want. You can go to New York and meet him face to face, but he can do virtual consultations outside of that. Jason, what else would you like to say as we're closing out here?
I'm excited to bring more information about nutrition to your audience, and help people fuel up and live their best lives and really get their best workouts in. It's truly my passion, and I'm just happy I was able to bring it to your audience today. So thank you guys so much.
Well, thank you, Jason. Good information.
Yeah, it's obvious. It's obvious that you're passionate about this, and I love to see your energy. It's contagious. I know that it's around lunchtime here in California as we're recording this, and I think I'm going to make some better choices for lunch today than maybe I would have before. So thank you. Grab your shoes, grab a snack, a good healthy snack, and go out and run.
Mas.